Well, hello to the eighth episode of the Reinvention Show. I'm so excited to have you here with me to talk about how we can not just survive today, uncertain, volatile, and disrupted world, but actually thrive in it. How can we take the entire mess of uncertainty, rapid change, acceleration, and turn it into a competitive advantage in our careers, in our companies and organizations, and in our communities. I'm super excited to have you here. Give me in the comments where you joining me from. This has been our tradition to shout out to this beautiful international community. Michael is here from Düsseldorf, Germany. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Excited to have you here. I'm still in Columbus, Ohio. I am planning to travel for the first time internationally if everything goes well. So let's see. Anna is here from Portugal, our certified reinvention practitioner in Portugal, the second one. Happy to have you here, Anna. Let me know where you're joining us from because it's a very, very special show today. Mahan is here from Washington, D.C. We had a great event yesterday for Greater Washington Leadership for Greater Washington. Happy to have you here. Welcome, everyone. This is a very, very special show because today my guest is a person who inspired me to start the show. I actually used his name of his amazing podcast as an inspiration, but I'm simply not as diligent and disciplined to do a podcast because podcasting, oh God, you guys, whoever are podcasting, God bless you. I am inspired by you, but it's a lot of hard work. So we're going the easy route with the live show. But a person that I have as a guest today is an inspiration on so many levels. Not only he reinvented himself more than once in his life, currently being one of the most important thinkers and doers in the field of reinvention around the world, consulting, coaching, and training. But in the past, he was also a professional sportsman and exceptional at that. So it's my great honor to bring to the stage Aidan McCullen, author of one of the best books of the past year, Undisruptable. Aidan, welcome, welcome, welcome.
It's an absolute pleasure as always, Nadia. Thank you for having me on your show.
It's an honor, it's a pleasure, and every time we talk, it's a blast. So it's even if nobody enjoys it, I'm gonna be selfish and enjoy it. So welcome. I love this book. I got it. I pre-ordered it long before. And by the way, I am not the only one. Look at this. Look, the fans are here. Fans are here. This is gonna be amazing. Undisruptable is phenomenal. You see, people are here showing up. I'm not the only one raving about this book because it takes something so complex as the uncertainty and speed of change in which we live and makes it into something beautiful and natural and easy in a way you speak. The metaphors you use is just glorious. So Undisruptable, the mindset of permanent reinvention for individuals, organizations, and life. First question: what is the mindset of permanent reinvention? Why do we all need it?
Well, most of your listeners, firstly, welcome. It's great to be with a fellow, as we'll talk about later on, imaginal selves, those people who are driving change throughout the world. I believe truly there's an awakening out there, and it takes people like you, Nadia. Mahan out there has his own podcast, I know. And it's so important for people to echo the great thinking out there so we make better decisions in our lives and ultimately have a better society and a better world. So that's a driving force behind everything that I do. There's a lady who was a writer. Her name was Edith Wharton. And Edith Wharton has this beautiful saying. She said, there's two ways to spread the light. One is to be the candle and the other is to be the mirror. And for me, that's a driving purpose behind so much of my work. There's light to be spread across the world, and there's different ways to spread it. One of them is, as you identified, through podcasting, through talks like this, through the Reinvention Show, where you spread other thinkers. And that's certainly the driving force behind why I do the podcast. And then there's actually creating content as well, which is creating the candle, is creating new ways of thinking, etc. And that's the driving force behind my writing and original content that I create. And one of the things I noticed, like you identified, is there's a lot of great content out there, but it's not always the most digestible. It's not always the most simple to understand. It can be academic in its nature. And I found this through 6 years of doing the Innovation Show. I haven't missed a week in 6 years because I love doing it. I learned so much from doing it. But I felt always an inkling inside me that it could be easier, it could be more digestible. And books like yours are like that. And it's difficult to do that. It's difficult to make them simple. As Einstein said, everything should be simple, but not simpler. And this led me to this idea of permanent reinvention. And your listeners, your audience, your community across the world will know what reinvention is versus innovation. And Nadia talked about the source of this show. It was actually, we were talking on my show when I had you on as a guest twice, by the way. And I said, I should have maybe called it the Reinvention Show. And you were like, yeah, it probably makes more sense. But there's a reason why I didn't. And the reason was because I didn't think at the time people were ready for that term, because innovation was popular. And if you type innovation into Google searches, it comes up all over the world. It comes up all the time. And you see a spike in innovation in the world. And you're starting to see that spike in reinvention now. And I do think it's important, Nadia, to say changing language changes behavior. Language is containers for thought. And if we change the language we use, we change how we actually behave, and then we actually change reality, because reality is just a collection of behaviors. But to come back to your question about permanent reinvention, with the speed of change that we experience, reinvention, as you say, is not an event. It's a permanent odyssey. And there's a reason I use the word odyssey. Odyssey versus journey. Journey has a distinct and predefined destination, while the word odyssey is about the journey itself. And just think back to Homer's Odyssey. It's about this amazing voyage, amazing odyssey that Odysseus goes upon. And I think that's the way to approach reinvention, because there's no ladder that we climb to the top of and we've made it. There's no safe harbor that we park in and we're done. This is an ongoing journey, and we continually need to add new mindsets, new capabilities, let go of old ones in order to survive this world of change. And leaning into that and embracing it is ultra important as well, because if you are hesitant about it, it won't work as well. It won't click as well. You won't see the beautiful serendipities that happen all the time. And that's pretty much the mindset of permanent reinvention.
I love that. And I love the idea of language changing the world. I truly think that we have to become more thoughtful and sophisticated in using the language. And I see the way people relax, their shoulders relax when I allow them to think about reinvention, which means you have a right to preserve some of it. You don't need to throw all of it away from start anew. And also you have a choice on how far and deep do you go in the process. Sometimes we're talking about small, easy, low-hanging fruits. Sometimes we're talking about radical reinvention. But all of it is a mix and a ease and opportunity that comes with that. But it's not always the most positive experience. I use the book, and I love, of course, you know me, I love visuals, and the book is filled with visuals. I love drawings. I love metaphors. So for me, it's a great reference point. And on page 22, you speak about how reinvention is always, or almost always, feels like a step back. And that's one of the reasons why we face so much resistance. When I do research and I survey our community of about 4,000 reinventors around the world, and I ask them, what's your number one challenge? Resistance to change has been consistent number one. And one of the reasons our communities, our companies, our teams resist reinvention is because it feels like a step back. Why does it feel like just a step back? And what do we do about it?
So this is where I think, and I love this about your approach to reinvention as well, Nadia, and I have the similar approach. It's much like one of the best history books of the world has been written recently enough by Yuval Noah Harari. And the reason that's such a successful book is he combines chemistry and physics and science and history. And I think if you take that as a model and you go, when we're looking at change, we need to look at the neuroscience of change, but we need to look at the compassion and empathy that are required in change. It's not as simple as introduce a new business model and things will change. You need to look at the human behind it as well. And for it to change a business model, you need to change a mental model. You don't change what people do until you change how they think. And changing how they think starts with language. It starts with metaphors. It starts with new frameworks and visuals, as you mentioned, that can give people a picture or a glimpse into the future. But even when you do that, it's difficult, because if you think about change, there's a beautiful saying by Buckminster Fuller, a hero for you and I, one of these early innovators. And he had this beautiful saying that there's nothing in a caterpillar that tells you it's going to be a butterfly. And think about that. When I come to you with this embryonic idea, even myself, when I have this idea and I go, I want to reinvent myself, the very first thing that's going to happen is all the reasons why I should not come to mind, because we're designed that way. And if you look at the neuroscience and the evolution of the human brain, we were designed for safety, because we were no different than the other animals on the planet, except we were actually more food than we got food. So we lived on grubs and we lived on scraps, while the rest of the planet lived on us. We were food. And in that world, we had to be very careful, because if I lived in my cave, and remember now, just put yourself in here. I'm in a cave. It's pitch dark. I am food more than I eat food. And I hear a rustle in the cave. I need to be sure that's not a snake. I need to be sure it's not a man-eating saber-toothed tiger. And they actually discovered a tiger that had one tooth, and actually when it opened its jaws, it was wide enough just to fit perfectly a human head inside. So we were hunted creatures. And in that world, we needed to be sure about the safety. So we have a negative bias. So we look for the reasons things don't work before we look for the reason they do. And it takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of learning and this spreading of the light that we're doing in order to change mindsets. And this is why when you have an established way of doing things, a mental model, which translates then into a business model, a successful business model, and a paradigm. And a paradigm is a beautiful Greek word. It just means a pattern of thinking. And then I go and I try to introduce a new way of thinking, a new business model, a new mental model, a new paradigm. The first thing you're going to do is see all the reasons it won't work. Let me give you an example. And the beautiful example I use in the book is that of the jump from the horse and cart to the automobile. So imagine yourself, Henry Ford, late 1800s. He has this great idea. I'm going to mass produce this automobile. He tries to get funding, can't get funding. One of the early adopters was a guy called Horace Rackham. Rackham goes to his local bank. He asks for funding. And the manager of that bank, the Michigan State Savings Bank, says to him, the automobile is just a fad. The horse and cart is here to stay. Now, in retrospect, like always, that looks like a terrible prediction. But you have to realize the paradigm, the pattern in which he made that statement. At the time, cars were rare. They were like a toy for the rich, those people who could afford them. They were so smelly and they broke down so much, they were known as stink chariots. But then zoom out a bit and look at the ecosystem. The ecosystem where roads were no more than glorified dirt tracks. They were designed for horse and carts. The predominant mode of transport was horse and cart and railway. So when people first saw the odd car cropping up over here and over there, they went, oh, that's just a toy for the rich, and they dismissed it. Now, that looks like a terrible prediction when in retrospect, but then you think about the first iPhone. The exact same thing happened. Nokia dismissed it, BlackBerry dismissed it, because the first iPhone wasn't a very good phone. It broke down a lot. Indeed, in the reveal, the iPhone, they weren't sure it was going to work when Steve Jobs first revealed it to the world. And this is what Buckminster Fuller meant when he said, that there's nothing in a caterpillar that tells you it's going to be a butterfly. All beginnings are small. They begin with failures and false starts and obstacles. And this is important for us on a personal level as well. You're going to stumble before you can walk like a child. You're going to make mistakes in order to fail forward. And failing your way to success is a great way to understand how you jump to a new paradigm, a new curve, and a new mental model, and ultimately a new business model.
Love that. So there's a lot of tweetable moments here. There's no change to a business model without a change to the mental model. Guys, this is like a perfect quotable quote. Another one, there's nothing in the butterfly, and there's nothing in the caterpillar that speaks of the butterfly. So important for us to understand and allow ourselves the messiness of that transition. And you have the picture behind you of the mess of the transition from the caterpillar to the butterfly. Can you speak a little bit about the stages of how does that happen, using that beautiful, beautiful metaphor, because you do it so well with the chrysalis and all of it?
So let's think about your community that you've brought together, Nadia. You're like the queen butterfly, establishing new cocoons all over the world. Here's what happens. It's a beautiful story when you dig into the physiology and into the biology of what actually happens in this amazing transformation, the metamorphosis of the caterpillar into the butterfly. And I want to frame it with this beautiful quote by the Nobel laureate Maya Angelou, who said, "We rejoice in the transformation of the butterfly, but we rarely recognize the pains that it's gone through in order to achieve that transformation." Here's what happens. The very first act when the caterpillar emerges from its shell is it turns to feed on the shell, using its former self as fuel for its future becoming. The next stage is the caterpillar goes through incremental growth. It becomes a bigger version of what it was, eating multiple times its own body weight through eating leaves, etc., etc. Sound familiar? Not just us during COVID going to the fridge over and over, but organizations just becoming an incremental better version of what they already are. But then, like us, like those change makers, like those catalysts of change that exist within organizations and throughout society, these cells, known as imaginal discs, beautifully named after the word imagination, come online at a specific point in the life cycle of the caterpillar. They resonate on a frequency that's so different from that of the DNA of the caterpillar that the caterpillar's immune system attacks the imaginal cells, thinking that they're an invading body. Those of you who are listening and watching who work in change, you'll know what that feels like. Then, in time, enough imaginal cells come together in a community like the reinvention community, and they overpower the DNA and the immune system of the caterpillar. The caterpillar is induced to become the chrysalis, and the chrysalis is a beautiful word. As opposed to the cocoon, the chrysalis is a point in the life cycle. The cocoon is the hardened skin of the caterpillar. Change is difficult, change is painful. What happens next is a repeat of the cycle. Deep within that cocoon, that hardened skin of the caterpillar, an enzyme is released that melts down the caterpillar and turns it into a soupy fuel that will fuel the future becoming that is the butterfly. But it's not over yet. As you can see in the image behind me, there's a point where the butterfly gazes into the cocoon from which it came. And I see this as this moment where you gaze into the past, including all the hardships and obstacles and pains and grudges that you've held in the past, all those things that have held you back. And you reframe them as milestones of change, not millstones of change. This is the point where you look into that past and you thank it and you express gratitude for all those things that made you what you are today, a unique version of yourself. And then the next stage is the most difficult, which is letting go of that cocoon and flying into the future.
I love those because they correspond so beautifully with the ebb and flow of reinvention cycle, the cycle that is indefinite and permanent and continuous. And when I see corporations that we work with that are successful at reinvention, that is about the same cycle. First, you need to remember that you have to reinvent on the left side of the S curve, on the growth side, when you are still growing, like the caterpillar expanding and eating so much of leaves and everything else that it doubles up in size, that is necessary to fuel the future growth because you will have to finance, invest, fuel, provide resources for that unknown future. The imaginal cells being attacked every time you have a resistance to change, every time you proposing something new and people are upset with you, they are crushing you. The boardroom is saying that you're out of your mind with your crazy ideas. The client to whom you're pitching a new proposal is just saying that you are completely out of touch. All of that is a normal, healthy, and very much needed process of change. So absolutely love that. And Rick is reacting to that as well, that it's a beautiful metaphor to remember along the way. Rick, it's particularly important to remember when you're in a gooey state. When the enzymes are already dissolving your past, but the new beautiful butterfly is definitely still not there. And this is so crucial that we recognize that every step of the way is important, and also speeding up the process does not help. There's a wonderful story about how the butterflies exit the chrysalis and the cocoon, that why the hole is so small, it's necessary for them to struggle out of the cocoon because it squeezes the enzyme goo out of their wings. And the beautiful story is that the person felt bad for the butterfly and they broke the cocoon to help them get out, and the butterfly died because the squeeze, the release of the old did not happen. So every part is crucial, including the part that we sometimes in our mind perceive as a negative, as something that is unnecessary. There is a breathe in and breathe out. There is expansion and contraction. Every living system has a moment of high and a moment of low, and both are equally necessary. So that is, for me, is a power of the butterfly story. There's another story in this book that I absolutely adore, and it comes closer to the end. So those of you who have a book in the hands, it's page 163, and it's called The Coconut Trap. What in the world is a coconut trap?
So I mentioned there about the last stages. As you can see behind me, there's this moment where the caterpillar holds on to the cocoon from which it came. But it can be difficult because you still need to let go of that past. You still need to let go of perhaps the mental model that was safe in the past. It was maybe the role in an organization you had that was guaranteed paycheck, but you were miserable and you were slowly dying inside. It was that role that you maybe over-identified with. It was the thing you were known best for that you need to let go of. And I tell this story through this beautiful story I came across called The Coconut Trap. So in a time where natives were permitted to capture monkeys and sell them to zoos or to invading soldiers sometimes as pets, they used an ingenious technique to do so. They'd take a coconut and they'd hollow a hole right on top, just wide enough for the monkey's hand to squeeze in. They'd fill that coconut with fruit that the monkeys would eat and smell. Then they'd take the coconuts and hang them on a tree that monkeys frequent. In time, the monkeys would smell the fruit, come to the tree, and what would they do? Squeeze the hand inside to grasp the fruit. Once they grasped the fruit, they created a fist, and they could no longer get their fist out of that coconut. The coconut was tied to the tree, so they were trapped. Here's the problem. Even when they saw the potential captors coming to take them away, they still hold on to the fruit. They remained prisoners to their past. all they had to do was let go in order to experience a beautiful new future, a beautiful new reinvention. And this is what happens to us in life. We cling to the familiar and we deny ourselves the most beautiful existences in the future. And those people who let go of that past and learn that cycle of permanent reinvention are the ones who have magnificent lives, magnificent experiences. And at the end of it all, when we're returning back to the earth from dust to dust, we will be the ones who don't have any regrets.
I think that is so illustrative of what happens in business and in life. The amount of meetings, the amount of events, projects, proposals that feel like I'm holding on to a fruit and therefore killing my own company, killing my own position, killing my own reality is just happening again and again. And this is also a question from somebody on Facebook, where they're asking, in what sense is letting go of the cocoon the most difficult part? I think the question suggests, and forgive me if I'm making a mistake in this assumption, but it suggests that you, our dear listener, is somebody who actually likes letting go of things. And you're one of those very small number of people around the world who embraces change and love change and find letting go the most exciting part. I'm the same person. I love blowing things up. For me, it's not the hard part. The hard part is actually finding the new homeostasis, which is equally important and equally necessary. So what would be your suggestion when you are yourself the one who is holding on to the fruit in the coconut and not letting go, or when you're working with somebody who is resisting change, who is not interested in trying new business models or new products, new processes? What is a first step, a first introduction to the mindset of permanent reinvention? What can we do to start on that odyssey?
So another story, and you know, as you know from the book, I use lots of stories. Is start small, and I mean really small. My son has a nut allergy, Nadia, as you know from reading the book, and they use this technique when they discover a child that has a nut allergy when they're young. They introduce a little bit of nuts at a very small level, so they give them one nut, then two, then three, and see how they react each time. And I suggest the same kind of mental model for introducing change. Start small, start with something like, say, for example, one of the things most of us do every year, and 90% of these fail, New Year's resolutions, is I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to look after my health. And then we start on a Monday and we go unbelievably hard and we're exhausted and we're sore. And when we go, oh, I'm going to take off. And then I'll take off Tuesday and I'll go Wednesday. Then I take off Wednesday too, because I'm still sore. And we forget that it's always messy in the middle, like you identified. When we're jumping to a new curve, it's always messy in the middle. It's difficult. And we're going to experience setbacks and pain and obstacles. So an example here, and I always highly recommend this. I go to the gym all the time. When you take a break, start again on a Friday, but do very little. Go in, perhaps even just stretch and have a shower. Get into the mindset once again. Then on Monday, don't do a full session, do a half session. And then maybe take Tuesday as your day off. Go in Wednesday and do a little bit more. Gradually add increasing intensity to the change, whatever it might be. The same with a diet, the same with any change, whether it's introducing new mental models or whatever it might be. Start small, experiment small, and you will experience big. Eventually, it's habit, it's creating the habit, and that takes a long time because it's not just creating a new habit, it's letting go of the old habit, and that's the story behind the coconut trap.
I love that. So that would be our advice and parting thoughts to our audience. Starting small and building this as a long-term habit is the essential message here. This is not a project you do once. This is not a strong push you go through and then come back to the business as usual. This is not something that you check mark and you forget and until the next decade comes along. Today's speed of change, The disruption that coming faster and faster means you have to start playing the game that is completely new, using the rules of the game that are completely different. What it means to be successful in a slow, predictable, certain, low volatility world is a completely different rules than playing the game when we're talking about high volatility, high uncertainty, constant disruption. What it means to be successful, what it means to be professional, what it means to be risk taker. The nature of risk is completely different. The nature of reality is completely different. So any parting thoughts, Aidan? As I said, Undisruptable, get it, beautiful work, easy read. Easy is always the hardest part. It needs to, the digestibility of the material is the difficult part. And this is incredibly digestible book. So grab it. And any parting thought, Aidan?
Well, firstly, thank you for your beautiful endorsement for the book as well. And it's going into a second print, and the endorsements will be printed in the book this time. So it'll be great to have you part of that as well. And secondly, it's just, don't hold back because of shame or fear of what other people think. Through my work as an executive coach, that's the thing I find most of us are fearful of what others will think of us. Most of the time there's a bias called the spotlight effect, and it's essentially that we think everybody's looking at us. They're so concerned with themselves and their own world that they're not looking. And ultimately, it's your life. It's not their life you're living. Don't live to somebody else's script. Become a script writer and write the most beautiful sitcoms. And the reason it's a sitcom and not a screenplay is a sitcom is different every single week. And that idea of writing the sitcom, but being the star of your own show and being also the writer of your own show will ultimately mean when you do come to the end, and perhaps the end is a new invention as well, we don't know until we get there, that there's no regrets. You're not full of regrets. There's an amazing book by a lady called Bronnie Ware, and she was a palliative nurse, and she looked at the top 5 regrets of dying. The number 1 regret was living life to the script of someone else rather than to what your hopes and dreams were. So go for it.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And there's a lot of love and thanks to you in our community for being who you are, for doing your work, for grinding every day and showing up for us. If you are not yet listening and subscribed to the beautiful Innovation Show, Aidan McCullen's Innovation Show, you can find it on every podcast. And it's remarkable combination. Almost every thinker you can imagine has been interviewed by that, showed up on that beautiful show, have been interviewed by Aidan. So please, please, please check it out. Some of the most provocative thoughts, but also some of the most remarkable thinkers of all time. So Aidan, love to have it. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
And for everyone who is listening, this has been another amazing feedback from all of you. Thank you so much for showing up. You can continue to grab resources from our end. Thank you so much for being here or watching this in replay. And if you want a little bit of more, number 1, you can always grab a copy of our latest book, The Chief Reinvention Officer Handbook, How to Thrive in Chaos. There will be a link in the comments to download that. Another thing that we're doing these days, if you are craving a little bit more of reinvention tools, ideas, insights between the shows, we run the show every Thursday at 11 a.m. US Eastern. But if you want a little bit more, if you are craving a little bit more, we just launched a TikTok channel. Imagine that, a business TikTok channel. It's a bite-sized videos, 30 seconds to 60 seconds each, on all things uncertainty, volatility, and reinvention. So there will be a link in the comments as well for you to check out our new TikTok channel and see if you like that format. And finally, those of you who are serious about building your reinvention muscle, building the skill, monetizing on this skill, building your own role in the company or your consultancy around reinvention skill set, mindset, and tool set. We do have our certified reinvention practitioner program starting on October 19th. So this is the last call. The train is about to leave the station. We have an amazing group of people joining from all over the world. This is probably the most international class we ever had. We have people from Europe, including Belgium, including Slovenia. We have people from different places in Africa, South Africa, Tanzania, New Zealand, Canada, US, Malaysia. It's really remarkable group. So we're happy to see you there. And until next Thursday, I am wishing you the most amazing and remarkable weekend. And grab a dose of reinvention here. This is such a beautiful book, so that Aidan doesn't hear how I speak behind his back. Grab it. It's just such a soul-filled book. So see you very, very soon. Thank you for joining me. Until next Thursday.